Welcome, beautiful damsels. The greatest threat to the status quo isn't loud rebellion, it's quiet defiance cloaked in self-sufficiency. In a world obsessed with fitting people into neat little boxes, Sigma females are the outliers, enigmatic, independent, and unapologetically authentic. They stride through life with a quiet confidence that neither demands attention nor seeks validation, and somehow, this mystique earns them the reputation of being villains. Why? Perhaps because nothing terrifies society more than a woman who doesn't play by its unwritten rules. Here's a fascinating fact. Studies in social psychology reveal that people often misinterpret independence as hostility, especially when it comes from women. And Sigma females? They've practically perfected the art of independence. It's no wonder they're cast as the proverbial villains in a world where conformity is celebrated. But before we delve into this, let's clear one thing up. Sigma females aren't plotting world domination. Though let's be honest, they probably could if they wanted to. No, they're just busy living life on their own terms. So buckle up. Let's unravel why society can't decide whether to admire them or label them as the ultimate femme fatales. Number 1. They're the modern-day archetype of the villainous outlier. Throughout history, society has had an uncanny tendency to villainize those who refuse to conform. From mythological outcasts to literary anti-heroes, the archetype of the misunderstood outlier persists. Sigma females fall squarely into this narrative. Their refusal to follow prescribed norms, whether societal, relational, or professional, positions them as modern-day disruptors. And disruptors have always been an uncomfortable presence. They don't fit neatly into the mold of what society expects, and when something doesn't fit, people often label it as a threat. Sigma females challenge traditional archetypes, rejecting the notion that women must rely on others for validation or support. They aren't chasing applause or climbing social ladders, which leaves people baffled. How can someone be so self-contained yet so influential? This quiet autonomy throws people off balance, and in a world addicted to predictability, they become a target of suspicion. They don't need anyone to complete them, and this independence is unsettling to those who define their own worth through relationships, power, or societal approval. The villain label sticks because it's easier to project insecurities onto those who break the mold than to question why the mold exists in the first place. Sigma females are mirrors reflecting society's discomfort with autonomy and individuality. Their actions aren't driven by rebellion but by self-mastery, yet they're perceived as antagonists because they don't conform to the roles others expect them to play. This isn't about malicious intent. Sigma females aren't interested in disrupting others. They're interested in building their own path. But in doing so, they challenge the unspoken rules everyone else quietly follows, and that in itself makes them dangerous in the eyes of a society that fears change. They're not villains, they're pioneers misunderstood as threats. Number 2, the media's role in stereotyping them. Media plays a pivotal role in shaping public perceptions, and when it comes to powerful, independent women, the narrative is often skewed. Fiction and popular culture frequently cast such women as antagonists, cold-hearted schemers, or emotionally detached villains. This trope isn't just lazy storytelling. It actively reinforces societal biases, making it harder for real-life Sigma females to be understood for who they truly are. Think about it. How often do we see a female character who is strong, self-sufficient, and ambitious without some underlying dark motivation? Whether it's the ruthless CEO, the calculating femme fatale, or the icy queen, these characters are rarely shown in a positive light. Instead, their independence is framed as a warning sign, their ambition twisted into selfishness, and their lack of emotional vulnerability presented as a flaw. This portrayal taps into a deep-seated cultural discomfort with women who defy traditional norms. Sigma females, who prioritize autonomy and authenticity over societal expectations, naturally become easy targets for these stereotypes. Their decision to step outside predefined roles isn't just misunderstood, it's vilified. The media plays into this by suggesting that a woman who doesn't seek validation or approval must have ulterior motives. The problem is these fictional archetypes don't just stay on the screen. They bleed into real life, shaping how society views independent women. A Sigma female's quiet confidence is misread as arrogance, her decisiveness as ruthlessness, and her boundaries as coldness. The media perpetuates this narrative because it's easier to turn complex characters into villains than to explore their depth. In reality, Sigma females aren't villains. They're multifaceted individuals navigating life on their own terms. But as long as the media clings to these outdated stereotypes, the line between fiction and reality remains dangerously blurred. Number 3. Refuse to play nice. Society has long conditioned women to be the caretakers of harmony, often expecting them to prioritize the feelings of others over their own truths. In this dynamic, being nice is synonymous with being likable, compliant, and inoffensive. Sigma females, however, reject this expectation outright. They refuse to water down their opinions, dilute their ambitions, or mask their authenticity just to make others comfortable. And while this makes them deeply respected by some, it can also lead to them being labeled as abrasive or unkind. The truth is, Sigma females don't set out to be contrary. They simply value honesty over performative politeness. If something needs to be said, they'll say it. And if a situation feels wrong, they'll challenge it. This approach doesn't sit well in a world where women are often expected to smile through discomfort and make sacrifices to keep the peace. Their straightforwardness can be mistaken for aggression, their confidence for arrogance, and their unwillingness to bend for stubbornness. But to a Sigma female, playing nice is a betrayal of self. They see no virtue in false kindness or in biting their tongue to placate others. Instead, they focus on being real, even if that realness ruffles a few feathers. It's not about being deliberately difficult. It's about staying true to who they are, regardless of how it's perceived. What society sometimes forgets is that this honesty comes with immense integrity. Sigma females aren't afraid to call out what others ignore, challenge what others accept, and pursue what others are too afraid to. Their refusal to play nice isn't a weakness, it's their greatest strength. But in a world still clinging to outdated norms, that strength is often misunderstood as a flaw. Number 4. Independent confidence misinterpreted as intimidation. Sigma females have an unshakable sense of self-confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. They know their worth, trust their instincts, and carry themselves with a quiet assurance that demands respect. But this independence and self-possession can leave others feeling uneasy, especially in environments where confidence is often confused with dominance or aggression. For many, encountering a woman who is unapologetically self-reliant challenges deeply ingrained perceptions of how women should behave. Society tends to expect women to temper their power with humility, to lead with deference, or to soften their strength with overt warmth. Sigma females don't play by these rules. They don't feel the need to diminish themselves or explain their every move, and this can be misinterpreted as arrogance or even hostility. This misinterpretation often stems from insecurity. People who are unsure of themselves may perceive the Sigma female's confidence as a direct challenge to their own inadequacies. In such cases, her self-assurance doesn't just intimidate, it threatens. Instead of admiring her independence, they label it as aloofness or cold ambition. Instead of seeing her as strong, they assume she's calculating or ruthless. The villain label becomes an easy scapegoat for this discomfort. It's simpler to cast a confident woman as intimidating than to question why her confidence feels unsettling in the first place. Sigma females, however, are not interested in intimidating anyone. They're simply focused on living life authentically and on their own terms. The irony is, the very thing that people find intimidating about Sigma females, their independence and quiet strength, is also what makes them inspiring. But until society learns to separate confidence from aggression, they'll continue to be misunderstood as villains, when in reality they're just boldly walking a path of self-mastery. Number 5. Criticized for embracing complexity. Sigma females are a paradox in motion, layered, multifaceted, and unapologetically complex. They defy easy categorization, existing in a gray area that society often struggles to navigate. In a world that craves simplicity and quick labels, this complexity can feel disorienting. People like their archetypes neat: the nurturing caregiver, the ambitious leader, the lovable optimist. But Sigma females don't fit into these predefined boxes, and that refusal to conform often invites criticism. They can be deeply introspective, yet bold in action, compassionate but not indulgent, approachable yet fiercely private. These seemingly contradictory traits make them difficult for others to predict or fully understand. Society, conditioned to think in binaries, good or bad, hero or villain, strong or weak, finds it easier to villainize what it cannot easily define. Instead of embracing their nuance, many reduce Sigma females to negative stereotypes: aloof, cold, or difficult. This discomfort stems from an unwillingness to engage with complexity. Sigma females don't broadcast their intentions or simplify their emotions for public consumption. They are a blend of logic and intuition, strength and vulnerability, pragmatism and passion. But to those who rely on stereotypes for understanding others, this depth can feel like a threat. If someone doesn't fit neatly into a box, how can they be controlled, categorized, or even trusted? What critics fail to see is that this complexity isn't a flaw. It's a testament to their authenticity. Sigma females have the courage to embrace all parts of themselves, even the parts that don't align with societal expectations. They aren't interested in performing a role for anyone's convenience. But as long as society clings to rigid archetypes, these layers will continue to be misunderstood and dismissed, with their complexity unfairly weaponized against them. Number 6. They don't apologize for their choices. Sigma females live unapologetically on their own terms, making choices based on their values, desires, and goals, not societal expectations. They don't feel the need to explain, justify, or seek approval for the paths they take, even if those paths seem unconventional to others. While this self-assured approach is empowering, it often unsettles people who equate a lack of apology with arrogance or defiance. Society is accustomed to women being agreeable, accommodating, and eager to justify their decisions, particularly when those choices deviate from the norm. Whether it's rejecting traditional career paths, choosing to remain single, or setting firm personal boundaries, Sigma females make decisions that prioritize their authenticity. This refusal to bend to external pressures or apologize for being different can make them targets of criticism. People mistake their decisiveness for stubbornness, their confidence for superiority. This dynamic is amplified by the narrative that women must be likable to be accepted. Sigma females, however, aren't concerned with being liked. They're focused on being true to themselves. Their ability to say, "This is my choice and I stand by it," without flinching is rare in a world that demands constant justification. But because society often equates nonconformity with rebellion, they're labeled as defiant, or worse, as villains plotting against the status quo. What's misunderstood is that their choices aren't about defiance at all. They're about alignment, living a life that feels right to them, no matter how unconventional it might seem. They're not out to prove a point or make anyone else feel small. But by refusing to apologize for their choices, they challenge others to confront their own discomfort with independence. And in a world still deeply tied to conformity, that can feel like a revolution. Number 7. They're miscast as too strategic. Sigma females are masters of intentionality. Every move they make is deliberate, from their career choices to the relationships they nurture. They don't act impulsively or follow societal scripts. Instead, they strategize, often thinking several steps ahead. But this calculated approach, though rooted in self-awareness and personal growth, is frequently misunderstood. To outsiders, their ability to weigh options and prioritize long-term goals can look suspiciously like manipulation or scheming, traits often associated with fictional villains. This miscasting stems from the cultural tendency to equate strategy with dishonesty, especially when it comes to women. A man who plans meticulously is often praised for being methodical and ambitious, but a woman doing the same is more likely to be seen as cold or conniving. For Sigma females, this double standard is particularly pronounced. Their refusal to act on whims or bow to societal pressures sets them apart, but it also makes them targets for unfair judgments. Their careful, intentional decisions aren't driven by a desire to deceive or control others. Instead, they come from a deep understanding of their own values and a commitment to staying true to themselves. They don't enter relationships lightly or take on projects without purpose. This level of focus can intimidate others, who might mistake their foresight for ulterior motives. The truth is, Sigma females aren't playing chess against the world. They're simply aligning their actions with their goals. But because their moves are thoughtful and not always obvious, they're often cast in a villainous light, much like the cunning antagonists of popular culture. In reality, their strategic nature isn't about winning at someone else's expense. It's about building a life that authentically reflects their ambitions and priorities. The misinterpretation lies not in their actions, but in the biases of those watching from the outside. Number 8, emotionally reserved, hence dehumanized. Sigma females are often emotionally reserved, choosing to keep their inner world private rather than wearing their feelings on their sleeves. This isn't a sign of apathy or indifference, it's simply how they navigate the world. They understand their emotions deeply but prefer to process them internally rather than sharing every feeling or thought with others. Unfortunately, in a society that equates emotional openness with warmth and relatability, this emotional reserve is often misread as coldness or detachment. Where alpha personalities may wear their hearts on their sleeves, Sigma females operate in a quieter, more introspective space. They're not interested in seeking validation through emotional displays or playing the role of the nurturing figure that society expects women to embody. Their emotional landscape is complex and deeply felt, but they don't feel the need to externalize it for others to understand. This choice is often misunderstood. People who are used to overt emotional expressions might see a Sigma female's reserved demeanor as an indicator of being aloof or uncaring, when in fact it's a sign of self-reliance and emotional intelligence. What happens next is a dangerous mischaracterization. Because they don't fit the mold of what society expects from women, warm, nurturing, overtly empathetic, they are dehumanized. They become stereotypes rather than individuals, with their emotional boundaries painted as heartlessness or cruelty. This leads to an assumption that they are cold, calculating, or even untrustworthy. The reality is, Sigma females often have a profound understanding of emotions, but they prefer to reserve their vulnerability for those who earn it, not for the world to casually observe. This emotional reserve doesn't make them less human. It makes them discerning, private, and strong in a way that others may struggle to comprehend. Yet, in a society that values openness above all, their reticence is misinterpreted as a flaw rather than a valuable trait. It's an unfair assumption, but it's one that's deeply rooted in the fear of what we don't fully understand. Number 9. The anti-hero syndrome. In a world where likability is synonymous with compliance, Sigma females stand as rebels. They don't follow the rules that society has set for what women should be or how they should behave. Instead, they carve their own path, one that doesn't seek approval or validation from others. This refusal to conform often places them in the uncomfortable position of being seen as anti-heroes rather than traditional good guys. Anti-heroes, by definition, are characters who defy conventional norms, taking morally ambiguous actions for a higher cause or personal gain. They're neither entirely good nor bad, existing somewhere in between, where their motives are often questioned and their methods challenged. Sigma females share this essence. They reject the conventional narrative of being the sweet and nurturing or self-sacrificing woman. Instead, they prioritize authenticity, personal growth, and independence, values that don't always fit neatly within society's expectations of female behavior. The problem is, when you're not playing by society's script, you become a challenge to the status quo. People often equate likability with compliance, thinking that to be good, one must appease others. Sigma females, however, don't feel the need to please anyone. They aren't seeking approval, and their choices often don't align with traditional definitions of good. They're not doing things for the sake of winning affection or approval. They're doing them because they align with their own vision of self-empowerment and authenticity. This is what can make them feel more like anti-heroes, complex, misunderstood figures who refuse to be easily categorized. Their refusal to conform, their unapologetic self-reliance, and their ability to act on their own terms make them as fascinating as they are controversial. They might not fit the ideal image of a hero, but they're certainly carving a space where strength, independence, and authenticity are the true measures of success. They're not villains, but they're not going to win any popularity contests either. And that, in a world obsessed with conformity, is exactly why they often resemble the very anti-heroes people love to fear. Number 10. They're seen as a threat to fragile egos. Sigma females pose a quiet but profound challenge to those whose self-worth is rooted in being needed or superior. Their success isn't reliant on external validation or the support systems that many rely on for affirmation. They thrive independently, carving out their own paths without needing to lean on others for approval or confirmation of their worth. This is a direct threat to individuals whose egos are fragile, built on the idea that their value comes from being indispensable, admired, or in control. For people who derive their self-esteem from being seen as leaders, caregivers, or authority figures, Sigma females' self-sufficiency is a reminder that their role is not as irreplaceable as they might like to think. A Sigma female doesn't require anyone to prop her up or validate her decisions. She's not interested in proving her worth through external means or seeking attention through actions meant to draw praise. Instead, she is content in her own competence and autonomy. This can feel unsettling to those whose identity is tied to the idea that others need them or look up to them. The success and independence of Sigma females force these individuals to confront their own insecurity. If a woman can thrive without conforming to traditional gender roles or relying on others, it shakes the foundation of those who rely on being needed for a sense of purpose. It's easier for them to label her as a threat, or worse, a villain, than to acknowledge the discomfort their own fragile ego brings when faced with the unshakable confidence of someone who doesn't need them to validate their existence. What this misses is that Sigma females aren't looking to dominate or diminish others. They're simply demonstrating that success, fulfillment, and confidence don't have to come at the expense of others. But for those whose self-worth is tied to the idea of superiority or being needed, this challenge feels like a threat, and it's easier to label it as villainous than to face the reflection it provides. In a world where conformity often reigns supreme and labels are hastily assigned, Sigma females stand as powerful, unapologetic outliers. Their independence, emotional reserve, and refusal to seek validation challenge the norms that dictate how women should think, behave, and succeed. They are often misunderstood, miscast as villains, when in fact they are simply individuals committed to authenticity, self-reliance, and independence. Their strength lies in their ability to thrive without the crutch of societal approval, refusing to play the roles others expect of them. What society fails to grasp is that Sigma females are not the villains they are often made out to be. They are the quiet revolutionaries, pushing boundaries not out of malice, but out of a genuine desire to live on their own terms. They are the complex, multi-dimensional figures who refuse to be confined to simplistic, outdated archetypes. And perhaps that is the most threatening thing of all, the fear of what we cannot fully understand. But as long as the world insists on categorizing, labeling, and shrinking the space for individuality, Sigma females will continue to defy expectations, inspiring others with their refusal to conform. In the end, it's not their refusal to fit in that makes them villains, but society's fear of the very thing they embody: strength, autonomy, and authenticity in their purest forms. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's time we start recognizing them not as threats, but as the trailblazers they truly are. If you found yourself captivated by the truth behind Sigma females and the forces that shape their image, make sure to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you're not just staying updated, you're becoming part of a community that values deep, thought-provoking content that challenges the status quo. Don't miss out on more exceptional insights that break the mold and dive into the real stories behind the labels. Join us, and let's continue unraveling the fascinating complexities of the world together. Subscribe now, and let's explore what's next. Thanks, damsels, for tuning in. See you in the next vid. Bye and stay blessed.